We're registering them to organize them into marketplaces where any of these devices is going to be able, of course, to communicate with any other devices in the ecosystem, but also to start transacting. Before we dive in, we kind of take for granted most of the time digital integrity. And we believe that unless you can fully secure the data behind it, does it really hold any value at all? So this is what we're going to try to address with one very important issue that we see, which is securing the source of truth. SealCoin is part of a cybersecurity group that does many things, among which we design microprocessors, microchips that are inside our devices. We produce identities for governments, but also for objects, and we launch satellites. SealCoin converges most of these assets and plugs it to Hedera ecosystem. But why does it make sense? Because most of the time, you get the physical integrity, which is very siloed, in a very closed ecosystem, without any transparency, okay? But it's given, which is very secure. On the other side, you have the digital integrity, where everything is clean, but where does this data come from? What we're trying to achieve here is to make this bridge, closing the trust gap, making sure that this physical integrity from the devices can actually sign their own transaction on-chain directly, okay? And because they are physically secure, no one can challenge the data. And then we can use the traditional digital integrity that we know to make sure that we can follow the transactions and start eventually monetizing data that holds value. The way we do that is that in our microchips, see it as a physical vault where you can control your public-private keys that we're very familiar with DLT. It's the same for physical objects. And what we do is that we take those hardware-backed device ID, we pair it with some cryptographic validation IoT, what we call certificate, which is the identity of the object, which is securely embedded at the heart of the object. And with that, we create a data flow that will make sure that the device will sign the transaction on-chain directly. That's a big issue to solve, but that does not create a solution. Our solution is to take all of our devices and make them transactional, okay? This is what we call the transactional IoT landscape. Our IoT are already connected. They communicate to each other. What we're injecting at the heart of the device is a payment mechanism that's going to make them fully autonomous and receive the DVP that we've heard for too many times today, delivery versus payment, okay? Whether it's a service, whether it's data, whether it's anything you may want to distribute around the device, you're going to be able to do that downloading this Silcoin agent that will manage the transactions behind the devices. We're live, actually. So we've been building that for the past year and a half together with THA and THG because they're helping us in taking all these assets from Hedera and making it a live product. So we're not talking about the future, we're talking about a reality where we enable people to generate their own identity. So right now we're using one identity that we know of from our group, but tomorrow you're going to be able to plug with a DID or with other different recognized identity. You're going to be able to connect with a wallet, Hashpack, Blade. Those are lives already. And obviously those are non-custodial wallets. And once you've done so, you're going to be able to securely onboard your devices into this platform. The process, again, leverages from a secure device registration that rely on the secure element of the microchips of the device. What works with those microchips can also work with an eSIM that has a trust zone environment to protect your private key and making sure that your device has this integrity, this physical integrity. Once you register your device, we're going to issue a certificate of authenticity for this device. by the way, is going to be mandatory in the IoT ecosystem for each of our devices to get this identity that they need to have. It's kind of the websites that we use. Nowadays, no one uses HTTP without the secure mechanism that they have, which is a certificate of authenticity. It's going to be exactly the same for our objects. And that's create a very secure flow to onboard devices and to get all these devices into a unified environment. But we're not just registering those devices for the fun of it. We're registering them to organize them into marketplaces where any of these devices is going to be able, of course, to communicate with any other devices in the ecosystem, but also to start transacting. And we're going to see in a minute the type of use cases that we can think of and we can bring to the Hedera environment. It's backed by our own token. So we created a POC a year and a half ago, a technical one to prove that it works. So we can connect two devices together, they can communicate together and exchange data for value with using a cryptocurrency to do that. Okay, it works. Based on that, we wrote a white paper, we sent it to FINMA, which is the local regulator here in Switzerland, equivalent to the SEC. Because we have one of our entities listed on the NASDAQ, we had a lot of issue with the SEC back in those days. Now it's much more easier to speak with them, obviously. But anyway, we're located in Switzerland, so we use FINMA as our main regulator. And our token that we have designed holds two functions. It's a utility function and a payment feature. The utility that you get is to enable all these devices to be able to transact autonomously, but hold also a digital access key to the platform and this mean of payment, the component of payment to settle the transactions. What we released early this year, and we received the confirmation 2 weeks ago from the FINMA again, it's an addendum to our initial white paper, where we're creating the possibility to have a proof of security pools organized into the ecosystem, enabling large corporates to start organizing their devices into private networks if they want to, but also to delegate the responsibility of purchasing all this security to bigger players. And of course, when you do so, you get access to a whole ton of services and access to the platform, and they get rewarded for that. What are the market potentials? We're going to see very briefly 3 use cases. The energy use case. Everyone will jump into the trading of energy, but there are so many regulatory hurdles that we cannot cross yet that we will go with by step. Okay? And the first steps are our consumption data and batteries. There's a new regulatory, for example, directive that was issued on our electric cars. Of course, the use case is that your solar panel that you have on your roof will generate energy. You may consume 80% of it, and the 20% remaining, what do? You sell it back to the energy provider. And sometimes, and this is what we saw last summer in France, at negative prices. It costs you money to generate energy. Here, you could actually sell it to your neighbor for a premium price. They would get a nice discount, and the car will purchase the energy straight to my solar panel because they can do so. But so many issues behind that. One very good use case is the battery. The battery holds more than 1/3 of the value of the whole car. And now it's going to be mandatory for our car's battery to have kind of the black box system that we see in the aviation for the planes. With that, we're going to enable these cars to much better monitor the data of their battery and start, before monetizing this data, to be able to transparently distribute this information and have a much better value behind it. And then, of course, the consumption. We actually provide in the UK most of the smart meters in the country. We're talking about 40 million microchip devices. The energy providers, leveraging on those smart meters, have a very good overview of your consumption at the smart meter level, at the door of your house. What we suggest is that we could give them an understanding of your energy consumption at a device level, which is much better. And when you think of larger enterprises, the device level is much bigger and much more complex than just the smart meter level. And those are the first use cases that we want to push, making sure that inside the smart meters, inside the batteries, but also on your solar panel, on your electric vehicle, you can inject the technology, making sure that it becomes autonomous to transact information or energy. The second use case is about the data, of course. We want to enable all of these objects to securely transact their data, making sure that no one else will have access to it, and we can provide the privacy environment which is required for that. The ultimate goal is to become an oracle of data, enabling a lot of smart contracts to be triggered by this data. And the last use case I wanted to mention is device as a service. Today, we have a lot of those manufacturers producing those devices that are stopping to sell those devices because it's a one-shot that you get with a client, and then you need to go back to the same client and sell them again another device, updated device, a better device, whatever. We see a lot of these manufacturers that are stopping to sell those devices and starting to sell recurring revenues in giving you the device, and you just pay for the service that you're using. And this is what, again, and I think Rob was mentioning that earlier, what we enable behind the micropayment services that we can afford. All of these are use cases that we can enable with the technology that we have inside the devices and the decentralized platform that we've created, being able to monetize those marketplaces where data and services can be monetized. And this is our journey, where we started a year and a half ago, and now we're building and working on the release of the platform. So the platform was announced in Davos. The MVP of the platform was announced in Davos earlier this year. It's up and running, and now to go to production, which is ready now, we will issue the token by the summer, making sure that we can meet with our also community and bringing a much bigger audience around us.
I'm now posting these interviews of Hedera builders independently to my channel. The community, influencers, and media outlets are free to use this content to spread the word on what's being built on Hedera. Once they're all uploaded, you'll be able to go to my channel and search for whatever topic or team you're interested in to find more information. Or you'll be able to get the most recent Hedera news by watching the latest HBAR Weekly update, so check them out.